In the last video, I spoke strictly about facts and how MJ owned 50% of Sony ATV. In this video, I'm gonna go deeper into whether or not Sony actually did feel threatened by MJ's power in the industry. Some people claim that he was being targeted in a grand conspiracy when he was alleged for sexual misconduct, precisely because he started becoming too big as a one-man army. My point in the last video was to show, as a matter of fact, how Michael Jackson ended up owning 50% of Sony ATV. It was an informational video. In this video, and I have to be honest, I'm gonna go into a theory which might not be true, but is definitely plausible. It's easy to go for general ideas about this, especially on the internet where anyone can say anything. But to get first-hand material from people that were involved in important aspects of Michael Jackson's career, I had to go deeply into the subject, reading close to 7 books in depth about Michael Jackson. In the last book I read, journalist Aphrodite Jones, who initially was against Michael Jackson, working for the big media machine, had change of mind after Michael Jackson won the trial. She claimed that she had a suspicion that the allegations were in part coming in, as I said, because Michael Jackson owned 50% of Sony ATV, getting royalties from artists such as Bob Dylan, the Beatles, Eminem, and other major superstars. In one of the pages in her book, Michael Jackson Conspiracy, where the theme is his 2005 court hearings, she even said she talked to Tom Mesereau, the attorney that defended Michael Jackson, about whether or not this could be the case. Now, Tom Mesereau is a very respected attorney and won the case back in 2005, a case that the media and much of the world thought was lopsided against Michael Jackson. This is not a nobody. When he says, if Michael were in jail or prison, how would he defend his ownership in the catalog? Sony had so much to gain if there was a conviction, and Sneddon would have gained celebrity status. These people did not actually have to sit together to conspire together. They might have helped each other on an unplanned level. Another example from the same chapter in that book was when Reverend Al Sharpton and Michael Jackson talked on a radio broadcast. They spoke about a lot in that broadcast, Mike crying out that he was innocent amongst others. But one of the more interesting paths the conversation took was when Al Sharpton then asked about whether or not this whole thing could have had something to do with the Sony ATV acquisition. Michael didn't want to go down that road. He was, as the book states, quote, clearly afraid to discuss the subject, and he only said one thing about the Sony ATV catalog, and quote, it's very valuable, it's worth a lot of money, and there's a big fight going on as we speak about that. I can't comment on it. There's a lot of conspiracy, I'll say that much, end quote. He definitely does not say that the Sony ATV acquisition specifically was the reason for these allegations, but he doesn't deny it either. It's hard to say, but if we backtrack a bit, and this is probably something most MJ fans already have a feel for, it's worth mentioning though, it was after the acquisition of the ATV part of the company that the media specifically started going against him. In the Thriller and Off the Wall era, Michael was a media darling, being a role model for everyone in America. But it was during the Bad era that things turned for the worse. Not significantly worse though, as the child abuse allegations started around '92. But still, the Bad era was a period that the media started making up a lot of rumors about him. And this is not something that MJ fans don't know. Bad came out in '87. He had a big break between Thriller, which came out in '82, and Bad, where he simply just disappeared, like Kendrick has done nowadays. And I need that album, Kendrick. But in the middle of that gap, when he was relatively inactive musically, that was when he acquired the ATV catalog. 50% of Sony ATV, aka the Beatles catalog, amongst other, one of the most valuable catalogs in the world. As he, in '87, was relatively gone from the spotlight, the media had no chance of reporting on him. But as he entered the scene again in '87, things started heating up. He was suddenly reported as a weird figure, and the media gave him nicknames such as Wacko Jacko, which was a stark contrast to the image the media had of him in '82. The creative outcome of this is the song Leave Me Alone, the prototype to Parts of Dangerous, and really the prototype for the whole History album lyrically, where his relationship to the media for the first time really is a theme. So his first media themed song happened right after the acquisition of the ATV catalog. Is that a coincidence, or maybe? I think there are many ways to look at the situation. Did Sony, for instance, donate money to the news outlets? I'm not saying that the allegations came because of any Sony agenda. Most likely, the Arvizo family and the Chandler family were money hungry and saw an opportunity in Michael. But it's definitely not unthinkable that corporations such as Sony, big corporations that are financially extremely powerful, have the capacity to donate money to media outlets. I mean, Bill Gates is someone who has done that lately. Bill Gates is one person, rich and wealthy, yes, but Sony is a fully fledged corporation in their prime when messing with Mike. Perhaps they operated completely independently of the families that came with allegations, but fueling fire to the flame once the flame were hot. In sum, the platform for negative coverage is set, allegations are in, now let's take this opportunity to maybe donate to the news outlets. In many ways, if Sony was to get the catalog back, now was the time, while the allegations were happening. Not sooner, because no acquisition of Sony ATV had happened in Michael's case, and certainly no allegations had happened either, and not too late, because the allegations were coming in at that precise moment in time. But at the same time, it's not reasonable to think that Sony would contribute to hurting Michael's sales, as this would hurt their own profits. This is most likely not something they would be willing to do, especially since he was in his prime. Contributing to giving him bad coverage would hurt their profits as well. So I'll exclude this theory. It's not likely. Also, there's no proof of Sony donations to media outlets. What about Sony associations to news media outlets? Does Sony own or associate with anything that can classify as news media? The only connections I have been able to make is that Sony bought CBS, aka Columbia Records, in, you guessed it, 1987, 2 years after the ATV acquisition. CBS Records was a subsidiary of CBS Viacom, who owns CBS News and CBS Radio, but this is hardly anything worth speculating about. In my opinion, it's a reach and not too much to base things on, but if we are reaching to be the devil's advocate in this case, there is a loose connection between a big part of news media and Sony. A reach? Most likely. And as I've said earlier, they would very likely not have hurt their own sales by indirectly giving him bad coverage, but it is possible. If we set aside the allegations against MJ and keep Sony disconnected from them, there is another way to look at the situation. After his death, Sony in fact did buy the ATV part of the catalog back. In 2016, they bought it back for $750 million, 10x the price MJ bought it for originally in '85. We have to remember, being as lucrative as a catalog this was, Michael likely would not have sold it if he was still alive. But this was done via the Michael Jackson estate, an estate that logically could not have been overseen by MJ because he was gone. It was overseen by John Branca, as it had been since the beginning. But with Michael not being here, Branca had full control over the negotiations. Sony triggered a clause that allowed either side to buy out the other side, and that happened. These are facts. Michael died, Sony bought back ATV, nothing spooky here. The conspiracy and mystery is as to whether or not Sony contributed to his death, not only to be able to buy the catalog back, but also for sales to pick up. Michael and Tommy Mottola, head of Sony Music, have never been on the best terms, but things were okay when Sony of Japan head Masao Morita was still alive, as he claimed he would protect Michael from Mottola if something was up. Morita was the guy that had the upper hand in their relationship, being loyal to Michael. After Morita's death, though, is when things started boiling between Mottola and Michael, as Mike now had no one from Sony keeping him safe. Michael coming with some words about Mottola and how labels deliberately sabotaged their artists for more power.
Sharpton was saying, people from James Brown to Sammy Davis Jr., some of the real pioneers that inspired me to be the entertainer that I am. These artists are always on tour because if they stopped touring, they would totally go broken. And it's been, the record companies really, really do conspire against their artists. They steal, they cheat, they do whatever they can, especially the black artists. Sony, Tommy Mottola. Tommy Mottola is the president of the record division. He is a mean, he's a racist, and he's very, very, very devilish.
But there's a reason for why MJ is so outspoken about this. He was coming with these claims because he did not get the licenses of the masters of his album, as he had a contract that set the date for reversion several years later. He saw the bigger picture when he said that the labels purposefully destroyed their artists. He saw the pattern and wanted out. He was looking for an early exit from his contract with Sony, demanding one even. The rift thus got bigger and then continued, with Sony denying Invincible the promotional budget of the other albums, literally not having any promotional work done in the US. It's still selling 10 million, by the way. The conspiracy is that Sony deliberately sabotaged his Invincible album to force him into bankruptcy and debt, making him sell his part of the ATV catalog. And that's sadly how it ended. When it comes to the last days of Michael, and how some people say that Sony were interested in him dead than alive, and the whole conspiracy of forcing him to sell the ATV part by him being in debt. I mean, he was broke in 2008, 2009, and also in debt in his last days. Because of that, he had to clear that debt one way or another. In some way, Sony's plan, if the alleged conspiracy theory is true, worked. The This Is It concerts were a way for him to pay off that debt. Now, I don't believe Sony directly caused his death. That seems too far-fetched, but that they were interested in him bankrupt to make him sell his catalog back to them to cover his debt is not improbable. Some people say that Dr. Murray, the doctor responsible for manslaughter on Mike, was hired by Sony, but this is not true. AEG, the ones behind the This Is It concerts, hired him for Michael. And this is a whole different conspiracy that AEG wanted him dead than alive, making more from his death than the actual concerts. They allowed him to perform even when they knew his physical state was bad. And this came out in leaked emails. As far as I know though, it had nothing to do with Sony, as AEG were not directly affiliated with Sony at all. So per se, it's not directly linked to Sony. Or is it? Well, there is one link that is worth looking at. A couple of days before Michael's death, Columbia Pictures, a division of, you guessed it, Sony, had struck a deal to make a movie out of This Is It rehearsals. Why would they strike a deal of making a movie before he even died? And why the rehearsals and not the concerts themselves? I mean, the concert format would be far more appealing, both visually, hype-wise, and performance-wise, than mere rehearsals. Michael's concerts have been filmed as separate pieces before, and you can see on the Another Part of Me Wembley performance that this is far more appealing than mere rehearsals. Isn't the hype of an actual concert more worth filming than rehearsals? The rational side of me says that the movie were supposed to be additional releases after the concerts, talking about the more behind the scenes aspect of the experience. But intuitively, I feel that it is odd that a deal like this was struck before he died and that the movie came out. Or maybe it's just me. Something doesn't add up. Besides this though, there are several other questions I want to look at. One of the questions I have is, after Mike's death, what actually triggered the clause in Sony's contract that says that either side could buy the other, aka Michael's ATV part? Who and what decided that? And why? Mike also had an attorney who was also the attorney of Sony. Michael didn't know about this until he wanted out. How did he get to that position, and who was he? I haven't found the answer to these questions, and there are many more. But if I do find out, I'll probably make a part 3 to dive even deeper, iceberg style. That's it guys for part 2. If you liked it, hit the like, subscribe, and smash that bell for more updates, and I'll talk to you next time.